Hello, everyone. This is Jim Morentz. I'm the Executive Director of the SABER community, and we've got a good discussion today arising from a project that many of you have participated in over the last few months since the coronavirus pandemic started, and that is on how businesses stay open during the pandemic, and then thus the lessons that can be learned from those experiences for those who are now reopening. So our topics for today, we'll do a quick SABER overview for any of you who are new to the webinar. Then we'll take a look at the pandemic practice monitoring partners and how we did this. Then we'll focus on lessons from the essential businesses. And then finally, how you can use the SABER pandemic techniques and technologies to improve your business. And then we're going to look south at Tropical Storm Cristobal as compounding events that we're going to be dealing with in the very near future. If you want to ask a question, either use the little question box or raise your hand, and we'll get to those at the end. Staying open longer, reopening faster. That's the mantra of SABER and the design for businesses during emergencies. And as overview, SABER started because businesses, when they're out of business, have an increased chance of failure the longer they're out of business. And therefore, businesses themselves came initially in forming this organization to the conclusion that after life-saving, a priority of the community needs to be to get businesses back in business. That's how you get back to normal. So SABER was created by the private sector to reduce the burden on businesses during this reporting requirement, because businesses have another job to do, and that's get back into business. And it also had the benefit of helping governments have a single place to get standardized, accurate, and timely information about those businesses. The organizing group had those big companies that you see there, really led by the Florida Division of Emergency Management, who presented this problem to us. And through those groups, we ended up with a mission statement, which is to influence government recovery priorities and enable business-to-business collaboration by providing accurate and timely business status information to help businesses stay open longer and get back into business faster. The organization of SABER has numerous types of businesses in it, but they really do focus in ESF 14's new infrastructure and private sector lifelines, food, water, sheltering, energy, health, and medical. Those are where our businesses come from. And how SABER work? Well, to get the information from business in the easiest way, we had to have multiple formats. And to share it with business, we had to have multiple formats. That's built around a technology for information sharing that was developed by the Department of Homeland Security. So the way the information gets in is fourfold. First, there can be a fully automated connection, and we have that working. And Walmart happens to be the leader in bringing that information in, but there are a couple of others that are in process as well. The second way is, and this is the most popular way, a spreadsheet, because this is the way most companies manage their business status reporting internally up their business chain of command. A spreadsheet that says these companies are, or these locations are in business, out of business, operating, not operating, operating on limited status. So what we did was use the technology that a company can give us any format of spreadsheet, put it onto the SABER website. We will have managed that information in advance to be able to go into the SABER information sharing tool set. The third way is very new and actually originated for the pandemic practices, to be able to go to saberspace.org and do a web status update. New business can come in and update that way. Existing businesses come in, as we'll see in the status reporting. They can verify the information and update it. And then the fourth way is a mobile app that SABER developed in concert with commercial organizations, Spot On Response. And field reporting is the mission of that commercial app, but a component of it is available to SABER members to do SABER status reporting. Once all that happened, the information comes into XchangeCore, this information sharing tool set that takes all those different types of forms of information, converts it into national standardized information, the National Information Exchange model, and then puts it out on the other side in many different formats that allow us to have government portals, incident management software, web-based mapping systems, mobile apps, and my favorite, a free copy of Google Earth, so that anybody can get up and running and seeing this valuable data that comes in. We've done that now for almost 5 years in various forms with lots of success, lots of emergencies, lots of background, and you see many of the organizations that have consumed this information and provided this information at one time or another during a variety of exercises and real emergencies. And for that, SABER's won awards. 2017, the FEMA Individual Community and Preparedness Award for Technology Innovation. The next year, International Association of Emergency Managers, Partners in Preparedness Award. And the last year, we were a finalist for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Citizens Award for Best Disaster Preparedness and Community Resiliency Program. Which takes us to today. We've learned lessons from the pandemic that are of value that we've shared in a report that I'll show you how to get, and also we'll discuss here. And we gathered that information because many of our members are essential businesses. They were required by or allowed to remain open during the pandemic by DHS having been so designated. We focused on 250,000 food businesses that provide FEMA Lifelines services by selling 80% of the gas. Virtually every food store in the country is part of that 250,000 locations. Delivering well over half of the bottled water, third of the ATMs, employing 7.5 million people, and more than $1 trillion. And they stayed open. As a result, that gives us an opportunity to understand better why and what they did to stay open. So for SABER, that meant a change. In normal emergencies, the problems businesses face staying open are what we focus on. What we've done in this case, though, is examine how businesses can stay open safely. And the importance of doing that is obvious. We took, therefore, a review of tangible measures that businesses are taking, both from the businesses as well as from industry professionals, associations, CDC, World Health Organization. And then our goal was to identify how those were adopted by businesses and share that information to government. We saw the benefit to the company being increasing number of businesses that adhere to social distancing and other safe practices, help drive down inspection rates, and understand how to reopen the country to commerce. Our objective was to research authoritative content and reduce the effort by business to maintain and improve this management system. That required us to start out with the business location information. Traditionally, companies have joined SABER and provided the information to us. Now we had to turn the tables and say, we gather that. We also needed to work with partners who were able to get the message out. From the business standpoint, We partnered with SafeGraph, which provides points of information data to lots of organizations, and the result was they were able to provide 500,000 new SABER business locations in those business areas for which we had concern. The monitoring technology allowed us to have these 500,000 new locations, 250,000 of those in the food supply chain, with whom SABER and I had worked previously in developing some emergency preparedness work in videos. And secondly, with the Food Marketing Industry Association, FMI. Together with the data, they helped us put this process in place that looks like this. We started with this 250,000 business locations that came from SABER members and SafeGraph. Second step was to take those and put them in the SABER technology. Third step was to research those pandemic practices out of websites, press releases, interviews, articles, as well as those who put their information directly into SABER. So we gathered those pandemic practices, supported by the associations who did member outreach through articles and newsletters and other presentations to their member organizations, that then led businesses back in step 5 to validate and update that information on the new saberspace.org website tools. Each one of those businesses, whether if they were a convenience store, they went in, had slightly different set of questions. From the grocery store, with a slightly different set of questions. The result of that combination of research and businesses is that of those 250,000 business locations, 139,000 reports of pandemic practices now exist inside of SABER. It's about 58%. The reporting itself was done on about 53%, but we continue to grow this, and the expectation is that we will continue to expand this, as we'll talk about at the end. In looking at the pandemic practices and what businesses were doing, we discovered they were implicitly asking 5 different questions. How do we need to change to keep our customers there and to get them back if they've wandered away? Secondly, what do we have to do to make our physical facilities safe? Thirdly, how do we keep that virus outside? Because if we can keep it outside, we're going to minimize contamination. Fourth, employees are key to being both inside and outside. So there are transition between our safe environment and that contaminated outside environment. How can we protect them both physically and economically? And then lastly, businesses were showing us that they wanted to do things to help the community. This is what the answers look like. We've got analytical tools, charts. We've got the website that we'll talk about at the end where you can go in and interrogate the data. More importantly, though, let's drill down into those as we did in the report to summarize some of these opportunities to learn. And we do this in a couple of ways. One is by looking at some consumer surveys about what consumers wanted, and then specifically how convenience stores and grocery stores have responded to the availability or opportunity to use these pandemic practices. So first of all, how do you get customers to come in during the pandemic? When consumer research tells us that 60% of the customers were afraid to shop and 73% visited stores less often. Well, there are 2 major ways that changed business behaviors were able to make customers feel better. Set of pandemic practices, the online ordering, in-store pickup, curbside pickup, delivery, contactless payments. All those things were things that businesses started doing fairly soon. Some of them took longer because they didn't have apps, but we've seen companies release their first mobile apps in order to do online ordering. In the report, you'll see one of the organizations saying that they had been looking at it for a while, but had to pull the trigger on it. Somewhere between 10% and 20% greater adoption of those things in grocery stores than convenience stores, because convenience stores are smaller. They allowed us to be able to do grocery stores to do the online ordering, curbside pickup, because their packaging is bundled, whereas convenience stores are more pick up and run. So there we saw the first major difference, and that allows for those who are offering services that have been closed, who want to reopen, to understand that it depends what you're selling that's going to help you decide which of these pandemic measures would be most effective for you. One of the interesting things was that businesses changed their business hours. They offered senior hours, responder, special care hours. And that was important to some consumers, because 15% of the consumers actually changed stores in order to go places where there were special hours. So those special hours were quickly adopted. 66% of grocery stores adopted special hours. But upon doing that, just to show how complex this world is, health experts said, you know what you just did? You now concentrated all those high-risk seniors in the store at the same time in the morning. We ought to take a look at that. And some of the stores, you see them listed there, decided that extending their hours to allow more time for social distancing while reducing the number of people who are allowed in the stores was a better way to handle that. So again, there's lots of lessons here depending on what business is trying to reopen that will allow them to gain some knowledge on what they might be able to do. In that extended hours, convenience stores were well ahead of the trend because they're open all the time, 24/7 operations. So only 4% of them had to adopt any type of special hours. So again, if you're reopening, there's a lesson there. And those lessons of how to reopen and stay open is restructuring the business. It doesn't need to be difficult. To the curb will increase customer confidence in the ability to get your information in place. Business reopening. You need to examine processes, fears, and maybe vary your products and services. And a small change can make a big difference in business success. All right, the second question was from businesses, what do we do to make our physical facilities safe? Customer perspective, that was really important, but in a slightly different way that one might not expect. It's not just that they wanted it to be clean, they wanted to see that it was clean. 60% of the customers, more than 50%, wanted to see something happening at checkout. The UV lighting was one way to do it. The plexiglass shields were another way. So that enhanced cleaning, sanitizing that everybody jumped on, 85% of convenience stores, 74% of grocery stores, wasn't enough. Consumers wanted to feel confident. Physical changes also took place. Changing the way they handled self-prepared and self-serve food and prepared food. More than a quarter of both of the stores did it. Plexiglass screens were quickly adopted by 20%, and that number has increased, we've seen. How you pay also became important. One of the first CDC comments was, money has become dirty. Well, 55% of the customers wanted no-touch payment services, and that's a physical task that needs to be done. But 38% of the convenience stores and 28%, or groceries, 28% of convenience stores adopted those during the pandemic. Social distancing critical. 60% of both groups started putting visual markers on the floor. 15% restricted their seating. So they started doing those physical things inside the facility to keep people apart and make it apparent that they were doing the type of cleaning that was necessary. Lessons there begin with the fact that you can lose customers. 28% of the customers stopped shopping at one, or started shopping, stopped shopping at their current retailer and went to a new retailer. 28%, and 15% said it was because the store was not taking necessary safety precautions. So you can lose business by customer perceptions. Reopening businesses need to regain customer trust through that perception. And visible indicators are the best way to show the commitment. When essential businesses were engaged in this, it was absolutely essential that they keep their customers coming back. And you may very well find as a reopening business that catering to those customer perceptions, not just making something safe, but obviously safe, is a critical component to your business success. Third area, how do we keep the bad stuff out? Clearly something customers wanted to see. You see that list of things there, all of them in the 50 and 60%: sanitizing mists, face masks, automatic doors, protective gloves. The way business is responding to control the customer source of contagion is very interesting. Those of you who have been on the calls before have heard me reference my son, who lives in Hong Kong. Has been a source of information on how they are doing it over there in Hong Kong. Really minimized their spread by visually screening their customers before they came in the store, taking their temperature. Admittedly, asymptomatic will get through that, but temperatures start to rise before they become feeling as though they are sick. Like 100% of stores did that in Hong Kong. But over here, less than 10% of grocery and 4% of convenience stores adopted that. There's a place for improvement. 58% of those people, the customers surveyed, wanted to limit the number of people in the store. 56% of the grocery stores were able to do that. Convenience stores, again, I think being smaller and fewer staff and a quicker pass-through, only 13% of them took that step. Consumers also supported face masks, big controversy, but 38% of groceries, 6% encouraged customers to wear masks. Customers are more willing to wear masks inside of stores, and grocery stores and convenience stores are giving them credit for. Then again, some very specific ways to protect against the transfer of the virus. Customers, again, want to do it. They want sanitary wipes. A third of the stores accommodated. Again, there's a cost to that, but it's an opportunity for reopening businesses to regain that customer trust by putting some sanitary wipes out there. Grocery stores, in particular convenience stores, provided gloves for fuel pumping or made changes to how the fuel pumped because 52% of customers thought those were a good step to do. Banning reusable cups and bags was a fairly easy step to take, and in fact one that a quarter of the convenience stores did, a few of the grocery stores did. Many more were involved in restricting repurchases, that is bringing something back that you've had in your house and you're going to drop it off on my counter. And also many were limiting the quantities of goods that they were able to sell, both because of supply side, but also as part of protecting against the transfer of the virus. So those were solid measures that were taken by essential businesses to keep the virus out. So for those who are reopening, some lessons. When a business reopens, you need to plan for this change customer-business interaction. If you're going to minimize the introduction of the virus into the space and remain open, you cannot become a contagion center and be forced to close. That's going to be the worst thing that we see businesses face, because you may have regained customer trust after reclose, have a contagion trace back to your store when become effective in contact tracing. Authorities are going to make the store close, a thorough cleaning take place, often requiring you to spend money on something that external cleaning services, and you don't want to face that sign outside your store that says closed for coronavirus cleaning. Therefore, keeping the facility clean and the virus out, absolutely critical. Well, what passes as often as customers back and forth between the outside and the inside becomes a transfer mechanism, but absolutely critical business asset for you are customers. I'm sorry, employees. Customers want assurances that you know what your employees are doing. They want, 57% want employee temperature checks, and they want to know the employee policies on sick leave and other things that allow employees the freedom to stay home when they don't feel well. So again, customer driven, perception driven. So number one thing you need to be able to do is keep the sick employee home. Paid sick leave. Even though convenience stores in particular are lower paid, fewer benefits, 28%, more than a quarter, jumped into that and said, we're going to now provide paid sick leave to make our employees stay home but be available. Not really conducive, those two types of stores, to employee remote work. But again, 10 and 17% of them allowed that to take place. Probably, I'm guessing, in the executive category or management category. But again, a not insignificant portion in a difficult remote work situation. So how do we minimize transmission then? We keep them home. That's number one. How do you minimize transmission there? 60% of the grocery stores required employees to wear masks. 20% of convenience stores. That was critical because in that employee health screening, a quarter of grocery stores and 10% of convenience stores met that in customer expectation of doing that health screening. And why do you want those employees to stay home when they have to, minimize transmission? It's so they can continue to work. So the business element of this set of pandemic measures leads to the goal of getting employees to stay available and remain at work. A couple of techniques that became apparent in the research and in the popular literature is providing health care or elder care options to employees and employee assistance on transit so that they could drive to work rather than taking public transit. Very few did that. Less than 5% of our essential businesses did that. A lesson, these are ways to keep your employees. Now, it's going to be a challenge for employees to come back to some of these businesses, although they will be ready to. Maybe a measure that can be adopted. Extra pay. That was well publicized. I won't name the names, but major big box stores announced $2 per hour increases, 20% increases. A big deal made of those. Again, probably a good public relations move, and those were certainly done in reality by 38% of the grocery stores, more than a quarter of the convenience stores. But this emergency has gone on, and those 4 major chain convenience stores are now ending that extra pay. I feel that there are 2 things that are just help justify that. First one is employees are now protected because they have engaged in all these pandemic measures, and therefore employees are getting their masks and their gloves and their barriers, which lets the conclusion be reached that we don't need to pay bonuses anymore because we have lowered the risk. Employees will decide whether that is a legitimate protection. From a public safety standpoint, having that risk lowered is our goal. How a reopening business addresses this issue is one that we can only offer the lessons of the essential businesses. And what are those lessons? Grocery and convenience stores had to go out and hire people because of increased business. During those first couple of months, both types of businesses saw record revenues because everyone turned to them for, at the beginning, panic buying, and secondly because 57% of disposable income is spent on food outside the home, restaurants, entertainment. Take that away, since all those closed, and that money was then spent in grocery stores and convenience stores to feed oneself. So convenience stores had this big rush of employees. May not be the case for reopening businesses in retail. Many of them are going to operate on partial employees and partial schedules, part-time schedules, which is going to change the dynamic entirely. So you can see the lesson from essential businesses, and reopening restaurant or retail business needs to apply that to your own employee situation. The need to retain employees on these bonus pays, therefore, simply may not be necessary for these reopening stores. As a result, you may not have to face the employee discontent that exists right now in certain places because that extra pay is ending. The employee thinking, hey, I did my part for you during your record revenue period, and I get nothing now. Reopening businesses, however, will absolutely have to face the same employee health concerns and demands for protection that essential business people have now put in place. So learning those lessons of what they did will be critical to maintaining that equilibrium in employee management relationship. So those issues and those lessons are ones that are present in the report that reopening businesses should examine. And the last question was, okay, I'm an essential business. I'm here. What can I do for the community? Well, 40% of grocery stores, 34% of convenience stores active, making charitable donations, community partnerships. But I think that really understates the percentage because anecdotally, we've seen examples of really small scale but high impact community help. In Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, a mid-sized grocery store, $50,000 worth of food and beverage contribution to a food bank in one short period of time, a 2-week period of time in the middle of March. Individual ShopRite, big chain store, but this single store teamed with a town in Connecticut, and they created a drive-through at the local high school where people could provide their credit card by phone for either, I think it was a $25 and $35 package of goods that were packaged up, drive-through, handed out if you've got your number that had been done on an online service where you had already given your credit card. Made for an extraordinarily efficient way to get reasonable price package set of food out to people. And there's a small grocery store chain that, if I'm going to recall, this was maybe 30, donated 7,000 masks focusing on their communities in coastal Georgia and South Carolina. So I think those numbers are smaller, and I think that you see that impact of businesses participating in the community as essential. And if you're reopening, you need to learn a couple of lessons from this. And that is, first of all, an individual business, the barber shop or restaurant or other reopening business, doesn't need to get crowded out by major brands and getting attention. Because reopening and being part of the community is so critical, you have to make your donations measurable and perceptible. You have to let the customer know. Don't be afraid of that sign that says, "We donated to the food bank." Tell your story. Keeping customers informed and involved. Just down the street from me 2 days ago, a store had customers and employees get involved in an event that allowed them to join together in a charitable community good. And inform the local media. Newspapers are crying for information. Your local blog, your community newsletter, Nextdoor is an extraordinary publication. Businesses, as we have seen from the essential businesses that we monitored, can benefit by doing good. And that community presence reinforces the customer view that you are good and may lead to increased customer brand loyalty. I've certainly seen customers walk away from unappealing brands, stores, and essential businesses and try new businesses because they have demonstrated their community presence and their safety. As a result, the key lesson for reopening is reintegrate as quickly as possible into that community again, because people will come back because they're hungry the first time, but the second time is what's going to keep you open and keep you in business. And this is one of the many, many measures that will help you stay open. Now, this is a little dense, but it's really critical. It's a summary on how to avoid the stigma, of reclosing. The stigma of reclosing. The first point is that we've learned from essential businesses that everything matters. There's both a defensive side and an offensive side. The virus can affect physically through employees from the inside, and it can be introduced with customers from the outside. So everything you do on the physical safety side matters. The virus can attack psychologically as well. It can affect employees and their diligence and willingness to come to work, and it can affect customers and their willingness to shop. So an absolutely critical component. You've got to look at this as though everything matters. Reopening means attracting customers. They have to deal with their fears, and you need to restructure your interaction with them. And the list of things that can be done to make customers feel better is quite clear in the report we just discussed. Keeping the virus out means addressing two really important issues, one of them seemingly controversial. First one is social distancing, which is usually being required upon reopening. You're only allowed to open to 20% of capacity. You're only allowed to have people 6 feet apart. All those things are easy for a government agency, public health agency, to say to a business and the business know that they have to carry out. The second issue, though, is masks. Masks are the first line of defense. They protect you when you're wearing them. They protect from the person who is contaminated, spreading their germs. Having masks to social distancing really is effective. Businesses need to promote or demand mask use. And we saw customers above 60% agreeing with that. You're going to have to deal with that small resistant minority. But by doing this, there's a new way to establish customer loyalty. So address that mask issue head on. When customers do arrive, their safety is your responsibility. So monitoring those employees, health measures there, critical, and then also those visible changes to the sanitary conditions lead to that perception of security, would keep your customers coming back. And lastly, that grocery store, convenience store benchmark for employee rewards. Those of you reopening have to find out whether that's sustainable, whether you can deal with the customer expectations, and whether it is necessary. So a lesson there that you can learn. In summary, essential businesses clearly have endeared themselves to the community. They made money, and they are continuing to do well, and they are continuing to change and continue these pandemic measures. And many of them, particularly with delivery and curbside delivery and pickup and things like that, are saying they anticipate that being a total change to their business model long into the future. So they have learned lessons of these pandemic measures. They've learned lessons as well on the public-private partnerships and voluntarism and the ability to engage in the community. Learning those lessons from essential businesses will help those of businesses that are reopening and those essential businesses remain open. Excuse me. Now, a couple more points that I want to show you. We're going to deal with this. Our next webinar will focus entirely on the technology side of this. But SABER's there, available, saberspace.org. Here's how you learn about the pandemic measures. You go on there, you click in from saberspace.org, follow the lead, and you can go to either National Association of Convenience Stores and focus on convenience stores. You can go to the Food Marketing Institute, focus only on grocery stores, or go to the saberspace.org or the U.S. Chamber of Commerce pages and focus on everyone, not just convenience stores, but other businesses as well, convenience and grocery, other businesses as well. When you get there, you're greeted by our selection map. The selection map is going to pop up, and I don't know whether you can read that, but if you go to the saberspace.org, there are now 139,000 some businesses for which we have acquired the pandemic practice information. You select either on a geographic area. This is where I am, since you really care about your local business, or you can select by brand, as you see on the right-hand side. Drop-down list all the brands that have been collected, several hundred of them in there, for convenience stores, fewer for grocery stores, obviously. But you can select one or more of those brands. You can combine the two and select brands inside your specific area. So it's a way to begin to slice what you're learning about. Down at the bottom, come to this level, click on that Get Results over there, or Get Details over there. You're going to do the query of this combination of brands or area. You can do one or the other. And you're going to see those business locations. The idea here is that if I'm a reopening business, I can look around me and see who has some experience. Maybe I walk down the street and have a chat with the convenience store owner, or have my manager connect with the manager of the grocery store, just to learn some of those little lessons that may help you avoid that stigma of closing. On the map, you're going to see the yellow list. Scroll through that and click on any one of those to see the information they have. The status comments there are their specific pandemic practices that have been employed by those. Click on any of those businesses. Of course, you're going to get a pop-up that lists all the pandemic business practices that they've been using. So a tool set for you to begin to learn about the pandemic practices of your neighborhood or your types of businesses. Then inform. There's a space there that says business owners. Verify your business status, update the status, or add your business. So if your brand is there, you can go into, click Verify Business or Update Business, and add business and verify and update. You go into a page, and if you've been a convenience store in NACS and you found your brand, you're going to select your brand off of here, and any of the pandemic practices that are different than what you have seen, change them. And this is you are the ultimate validator of this information. Change them by clicking. A few other questions you can ask. We validate your information. You click on it. We then verify that so that you're not changing information that you don't have a right to change. And you've now informed others. If your business isn't there, either as a dot on the map or in the brand drop-down, then there's a box there, that's a button there that says add a new business. You can do that, quickly run through, provide your pandemic practices, add the information in, and again, we'll validate that, come back to you with a username and password so that in the future you are able to update your information. So that tool set is where we sit today in saying, okay, this is the baseline we've built, 139,000 and 250,000. The National Association of Convenience Stores and FMI, the Food Industry Association, through their outreach programs are getting more people to bring their information in here. And if you're using the information, grab it, update it, validate it so that everybody is current. Then on the other side of using the information as more than an observer, all this is available. You can get this data, use it in your own maps, your own analytical tools, your own survey tools, whatever you want to do. Data is freely available. Enroll at saberspace.org. That'll lead you to an online library of key documents. This one over here is a guide to SABER query parameters, so you can get the data and process it in a couple of different formats as we described earlier. And then this one is a guide for providing the data. So if you want to input additional data, how to do the spreadsheets, how to do all the other 4 different measures that we talked about. So use the data. It's freely available, and take a look at what your state looks like in pandemic measures so that perhaps in your business emergency operations center, you can point people to specific measures that your state differs from the national average. What comes next? Well, we're going to continue monitoring pandemic practices, making the data available for your display and analysis. We're going to continue reporting business status best practices so that customers are continually engaged in the next emergency as part of our process of building this multi-hazard status network. And you see there, hurricane, now tropical storm, now depression, soon again tropical storm again. Cristobal will be a landfall in the common area in the Gulf Coast, it looks like, at some point in the next 3 or 4 days. And SABER will be there monitoring our standard business status reporting as well, showing you how that may very well marry up with the business practices of the pandemic. So to conclude, get the report by becoming a SABER member at saberspace.org, and it'll lead you there. The coronavirus business preparedness impacts, separate pathway in on the saberspace.org. Remember the SABER Partner mobile app with constantly updating business information about how to reopen and the pandemic practices, all of which, with a little luck, helps you be ready for the next emergency. One more step. So with that, let me open it up to any questions. How long will you continue monitoring pandemic data? I suppose until there's a vaccine and everybody doesn't have a problem with it. SABER's there every day, 24 hours a day, and data is constantly being updated by end users who are out there in their various methods, and as well as especially during emergencies. And Christine, hi Christine, how are you? Her question is, where on SABER site are the recordings? There's a link right on the first page to the SABER YouTube channel. And there's the SABER YouTube channel, hit it there, and it shares with the XchangeCore YouTube channel, and all of our past webinars recordings are there. And wish everyone well. Stay safe, wear your mask, stay away from people, and good luck for those of you in the Gulf region. All the best, and bye everybody.